Hey, everybody, welcome to the First Issue Club podcast. And today on the podcast, we have me, Budget King, Mike D, Caitlin, and Greg. Hi. This week, we're doing a little bit different. We're covering Birds of Prey, the movie. What comes after Birds of Prey in the name?
The Immaculate Conception of Harry.
The fantabulous emancipation of Harley.
One Miss Harley Quinn,
Yeah,
I think.
there you go.
Yeah.
Great job.
Quite the tongue twister.
You guys are the DC marketing team would be very proud of you. I think you're the only people that could repeat that back.
We had a conversation about this that we think the only reason there's that extra long weird tagline is that someone high up was like, what, you're not going to put Harley Quinn's name in this? No one's going to go see this movie.
Yeah.
I think it was a dare.
How far away can you get Harley Quinn's name from the actual title?
How many words can you put in the title?
As long as it's in there, we're good.
Right.
All right, so this is a review or just a discussion of a recent movie that came out. It came out this week. Birds of Prey came out. We were doing the whole episode on Birds of Prey. We have done this before. We love changing up formats a little bit. So some house cleaning at the end of this podcast, because we might have some new listeners on this and for various other reasons, we're going to talk about non-superhero comics that you might want to jump into that happened in the last year and a half. And we also did a real episode of the our two favorite number ones that came out this week. That real episode is actually on our Patreon. So if you want to go check that out, if you have that itch to scratch, if you are an addict and you have to have it, then you could just pay the $3.99 this month, get it, and then instantly cancel. That's how I like to do my gym memberships. So you do you on that front. Anything else?
I think we should just get right into it.
Well, then let's get this
Podcast.
started. That's a thing we say. That's a thing we say. So this movie, as it was advertised, and its name, which we already joked about in the top, came across as silly, I think. It might be putting it lightly.
Lighthearted is what they're going for. I think they've gotten a lot of critiques in the past about their movies being too dark, too gritty.
Or heavy-handed.
Yeah.
Zany, a little bit.
There was some zane.
And very much Harley Quinn is at the front of it. Thoughts on just seeing the name and the trailer? So going into this movie, what are your emotions before you go see this movie?
There were a couple different trailers. I really liked the idea of a female team-up. I think it's the first trailer that was released was one that got me really hyped about seeing it.
Yeah,
there was a second trailer that I'm not as familiar with that I think kind of slowed the roll on the hype train a little bit for a lot of people, but I'm not as familiar with that one.
I think tonally they just were looking to get people back into the DC bandwagon. You know, fun, bright colors. Harley Quinn's here. Everyone liked her.
That's what I picked up too. Over the top.
Yeah.
I was thinking that whatever we were getting ourselves into was just going to be so cartoony and wild that it was going to be fun, and that was my base expectations for this movie started.
And I think that this movie comes on the tail of Suicide Squad, which is where Harley Quinn is introduced into the DC universe in live action form.
Yeah.
And really the only good thing I ever heard anybody say about Suicide Squad was Harley Quinn looked cool.
Yeah, so they wanted to bank on that again.
Yeah, not even that her performance was necessarily great in that movie, but
not the worst idea if you're them and figuring out how are we going to keep these movies going with the MCU ever expanding. We'll take the best part of that movie and the best feedback that we got from that and see how we can turn it into something.
Right, and I think that and we've talked about this on this podcast a lot. If they need to cash in on Joker and Harley Quinn, because those are their two biggest entities. And in fact, I think in some ways more than Batman and Superman. And so that's what they're doing here.
I would agree, and it's crazy to think the pop cultural relevance of just Harley Quinn's outfit. Mm-hmm. And the effect that had on just American nerd culture at large.
It was either her or Deadpool, and that was all you would see at conventions.
Totally. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know that was the style of Harley Quinn in the comic books leading up to the Suicide Squad movie. But it's certainly taken a 180, and now the movie is driving people's perception of what Harley Quinn looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And the marketing worked because directly behind us when we saw it on opening night was a whole row of roller derby people there. So if that's like the market they're going for, which seems
I think that's the aesthetic, yeah.
Yeah. So like somewhere in between like rockabilly, like party girl thing,
Yeah.
I guess is what they're going for. It's not goth, which is it's like an interesting juxtaposition.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, it just is like self-affirming, like be a sex icon and be whoever you want, and also be violent. I guess if that's like your brand of
When it calls for it.
But also not, you don't have to be prim and proper.
I think it was pretty telling early on that Harley Quinn was going to be a major role in this. And the fact that they called it a Birds of Prey movie was, I think, a little misleading, yeah.
And this will be the first spoiler, I think, because it's worth mentioning. The Birds of Prey don't even form until literally the last 5 minutes of the movie.
Right.
Which is fine to do. I think that's an interesting... maybe it's the origin story of the Birds of Prey, but this is 100% a Harley Quinn movie. It could have just been called Harley Quinn.
That's the one critique I would give it. If they're not trying to expand the Birds of Prey into anything, they should not have marketed or named this movie what
I mean,
they
do you
did.
guys even foresee a Birds of Prey movie coming out?
I would be into it.
I would be into it, but they didn't flesh out the other characters in
hardly
any
at
way. Like, this is just a Harley Quinn movie.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of weird, like, I don't know.
And the way it even leaves off, like, there's no reason for Harley to even be associated with them anymore.
Well, she isn't at all.
Yeah.
She leaves him high and dry.
I was worried about the sort of money this movie was going to make just based on some of that marketing. That not a lot of people were necessarily going to know or care about Birds of Prey. And then Harley Quinn squeaked in
I think
tail
though,
end of the title.
my favorite character of the whole thing was Huntress, though.
Huntress was very cool.
She was, and I mean, they didn't really flesh her out, but just the way she kind of brought the character to the screen was very entertaining to me.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. They kind of did that little Kill Bill thing with each of the assassins, so that was maybe a little bit of the background, but
yeah, but
you just don't get a sense of the ensemble.
And I don't even really know, like, the motive behind, like, Black Canary. Like, we get a sense that her mother had the same powers that she did. She only used her vocal cord powers one time in the whole movie.
But that was part of her backstory, is not wanting to. Because she didn't want the life that her mom had.
Yeah.
And you get a little bit more of her from, like, shows like Arrow and stuff like that, but there wasn't too much of a deep dive in here.
No.
So while we're on the marketing of this, one of the things that I heard about this, like pro it, was how, female driven it was, the cast, and then also the director, Kathy Yan. Do you guys know anything about that director?
I looked up some of her movies. I hadn't heard of any of the movies that she has done before.
They look interesting when I looked them up as well, but I wasn't familiar with
I think
her.
she's a bit of a newer director as far as directors go.
So as a debut for us, as like as far as like a box office big movie, pretty strong coming, I think, or showing, I think.
Yeah. It wasn't a bad movie. It was fun,
Yeah.
and like it did exactly what DC wanted it to do, was maybe get newer fans and older fans back on.
We'll get to
with
our
them.
overall rating, but I just didn't know if the marketing of if that led to you coming to it like, oh, super femme.
I didn't get an overarching sense of it was going to be all out girl power, in your face, stuff like that.
But I remember talking to you, to Greg, after we left the theater, and saying that I appreciated all that it did for those themes without being so heavy-handed about it. Because you've got several emancipation stories, but they're not hitting you over the head with them. You do get a sense that, okay, these are all girls kicking ass. The fight scenes were crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And like you could see that they could do some damage, and you could see that they were not relying on feminine wiles to get out of situations. Or like you even have one who's singing in a club, and she doesn't really use that sexuality overtly in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
They're just like kicking ass. And that was kind of cool. But it wasn't like beating you over the head.
Women,
with,
just like you or I.
Yeah.
One narrative plot through the whole movie is that one character has eaten a diamond and has to shit it out for the entire movie.
So we got two
Yeah.
journeys in this movie. Harley Quinn coming into her identity, and then this diamond passing through this young woman's digestive tract.
Maybe that's what they should have led with on the marketing. The
Birds of
story-
prey, and I shit a diamond.
The story of a diamond. Yeah, this could have been the real uncut gem.
Diamonds are a girl's best friend.
Okay, as far as so DC gets a lot of shit for not having as good of movies as Marvel
Yep.
does. Even though, as you guys covered in your Patreon episode, DC consistently outsells Marvel in the comic book industry. For those of you who don't know that, it's a flip world
Yes.
in the paper realm. But DC's as a whole, especially for live action, have been thought of as the lesser movies. They don't really know what they want to be. They know they want to be dark, but they don't really deliver. And they certainly didn't deliver on their big superhero united Justice League in the way that Avengers did. So with the most recent tonality or the tone in general of DC, how does this fit? Is this a good direction for it? Thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a great fit. I think
Yeah.
it's more of you're going to this movie to have fun and to enjoy yourself. And whereas with the other movies, you're bogged down with, too dark of a tone, the characters
Yes.
being kind of just flat and not entertaining.
One of the best things that Marvel movies did for comic book movies was that they made it so they didn't all have to have a singular tone, as in the comic book movie was the genre itself. And DC, realizing that not all of their movies had to be dark, was such a blessing. The fact that they can have some of the more seriously toned ones, like Joker, but can also have their Deadpool-esque one which is I think the closest comp for this Harley Quinn movie is wonderful. And I would expect moving forward for the tonality of the movie and the genre of the movie to more better match and suit the character type than just being it's a DC movie, so it's gritty.
Yeah.
Right. What's funny is before I walked into this movie, an hour before, I was telling somebody I was going to go see it, and they're like, "Oh, good luck. DC movies have sucked recently." And I was kind of like, I don't know. I just watched the Joker, and I thought it was amazing, although it is problematic in a lot of ways. You guys saw Shazam. Thoughts?
It's a movie that knows what it is a little more than some
Yeah.
of the
It was
other
super
DC
fun.
movies.
It was. I have been avoiding it for a long time because I
Yeah.
thought, just like everybody else who's been burned by a DC movie, you're like, I don't really want to sit through 2.5 hours of boring dialogue and too dark of a screen, and it was a total delight.
And also with Wonder Woman coming out, with the 80s, they're kind of doing the Thor thing where it's very much 80s centered. Those trailers look fucking amazing.
Yep.
I kind of think I guess don't sell out on DC just yet. In some ways would be my kind of sell for it. It was Birds of Prey was not bad.
No.
It was borderline good. I guess we'll get to our overall ratings.
Yeah, it's a good step towards gaining the audience's trust back. That's for sure.
And that's what sucks about DC. They shot themselves in the foot so hard in the beginning that they've lost a lot of trust with the audience that they wanted, and now they're having to not only get out of this hole that they dug, but gain back their viewership in the process.
If it wasn't a problem, we wouldn't be having a conversation about how it fits in with the other
Right.
That's true.
movies.
I mean, and I think, and when we say shot in their foot, I think what people are saying is the Christopher Nolan Batmans were epic.
Yeah.
Insanely, in some ways, cinema defining, and then they went nowhere after that. It's hard to even name a DC success story after that until Wonder Woman gets some steam, and then I think Joker is the biggest success story since then, and so hopefully they could get back on that track.
Yeah.
One thing I was interested to hear from you guys, speaking of this kind of tonally. So one thing I wanted to hear from you guys, speaking of this movie tonally, is if there was a pie chart of genre, how would you break that up into different movie genres? Where does this movie fall mostly?
Is superhero one we can use?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
I think I've got an idea in my head.
Okay.
You mean Batman, Mr. Freeze?
I think I've got mine
Yeah.
somewhat.
Mine is kind of this would be my version. This is in my mind, this is a superhero version of Tu Wong Fu, which is you're getting this band of kind of mismatched people together on one journey,
Yeah.
and they have everyone has a big personality.
Yeah.
In this, and they all play together well. I feel like this may be like a weird. It's not correct to call it a cult movie, but like in the realm of DC, like this will be their most like cult classic, because it shouldn't fit in any of their line.
Yeah.
Because it's like zany. It's basically an entire female cast except for the villains, I should say. And I don't know. That's where I'm sitting with it. Just a fun romp.
I think it's just their version of Deadpool, which is not bad. Like whatever that is, comedic action movie.
You hit it there with me with the word action.
Same.
I think this movie is like 70% action movie.
I would have even put that a little higher.
Would
it
you
was
have?
like that was pretty much wall to wall.
I had a moment where we were like halfway through the movie, and I was like, man, this is almost John Wick with how much there is like ass kicking in this.
So many
which really
stunts.
surprised me. Yeah, a lot of stunt work, a lot of great fight scenes.
I think like 10 minutes in, we have the big bad Black Mask
Yep.
carving somebody's face off.
Yeah.
And I had to be like, wait, is this?
Like a horror fucked up movie.
Or was this movie R? I don't even know.
It was art.
It had to have been. They had so many F-bombs,
Okay, yeah.
so many bones breaking
So-
that you don't cut away from.
Yeah.
So think about that. If that's DC's move, is to go like, you know what? Our superhero movies are R.
You don't have to make them dark, but they can still be R.
Yeah.
and be really
they have
good.
They have adult content in them. That was, certainly action, to the point that I was like, man, how did Harley learn to fight so well? Or any of them learned it? Like, I don't really need that. Or like they trained with who did Batman train with forever? Ra's al Ghul.
Oh, yeah.
Like I don't need like a whole movie on that. But I was kind of like, what MMA like gym is she going to constantly to be this
Right.
much of a badass?
Yeah.
I think just her many years with the Joker,
Okay.
you just kind of learn on site. A lot of hands-on learning.
The choreography was insane. So
That's
good.
what I said. Like, this movie had more close-up action than maybe any Marvel movie I've seen. Like, there wasn't much CGI or anything like that. This was full-on, like Mike said earlier, John Wick-esque, like, just fucking brutality.
If anything, I feel like the trailer and the lead-up sold it short in some ways.
As far as action goes.
Yeah, John Wick, great comparison. Atomic Blonde, like another,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it should have sold itself as like kick-ass. I don't know that it should have, but had it, I would have been like, oh, that kick-ass Harley Quinn movie.
One thing I think about tonality wise as well was some of the more cartoony comical things that ended up in the movie. And right when we were leaving the theater, there was something that I felt a little different about than I think the rest of you guys, which was the musical sing-songy part of the movie.
Yes.
Oh, I
She's
got
getting-
an eye roll from
She's
Budget
getting
King.
knocked around, and it's really brief, actually.
Right.
For what it probably cost to set up and do and all that, it's
Yes.
very brief. But
This is like her
it's not even a full number.
hallucination mid being like knocked upside the head.
yeah,
I thought going into the movie there was going to be way more surreal scenes like that. And I think just because I was expecting it, I wanted more of that in this movie.
It kind of dips into the psychosis of Harley Quinn, of how
Yeah.
she goes from doctor to like serial killer or whatever.
Right.
it's like okay, this woman's brain was already a little bit splintered.
And there's this animated sequence that kicks off the movie, and that tonally is completely different than anything else that really happens in the movie, which was odd, right?
They never bring that back.
No.
I was glad
the
that I was
musical.
glad that they didn't. I was like, oh god, if we're gonna get these like dips into her like psychosis the whole time, it's just gonna be a rough movie to watch.
She didn't have enough time to stop and think. That was probably the only time where she was
Yeah.
like, can't do anything else. I'm literally being beaten unconscious.
Yeah.
Might as well go into this weird dreamscape.
When somebody shoots cocaine and she like snorts it and is like, yeah, I was like, all right, I'm in for this. This is cool.
That was
I liked that.
what company is going to say, yeah, there's a shoot up and they hit confiscated cocaine and the hero of the movie
Does it.
Right.
like gets a
It's like,
fucking buzz off of it
just
and
what I
is-
needed.
and is like, yes, I acknowledge what this is and I needed it and now I'm
Right.
there. Like, that was great.
And like I don't have much experience with cocaine, but I would assume it doesn't like make you like a superhero. And they didn't overplay it.
No.
They just gave her a little bit of confidence that she needed to like
Just kick some ass.
I could see somebody being like, "Oh, and the superhero serum of cocaine."
And do you think that was a line that even Deadpool would have crossed?
No.
I don't think so either.
Yes.
And I think this is like the edge from DC that DC fans are like, fuck yeah, Marvel wouldn't do that. I
Well,
think
and-
that's the sort of thing they're looking for.
I think too, like I don't think any of them would have gotten to the point where they called to turn the kid in like she did. She was like, she had to have been brought even a little bit lower to be like,
Turn
okay, I
Cody.
guess I really can't do that.
Wait, you're
You
saying
know what I
like where she turns on the kid and
Yeah.
like and is like, "Fuck it, you know
Yeah,
what? I
I'm calling
actually
you
am
in."
a bad
Yeah.
person." Yeah. Yeah, you're right. They kept Harley Quinn remains a semi-bad guy through this journey, which is pretty hard to do.
Yeah, there's certainly times where you're rooting for her and times when you're just like, fuck this person. She fucking sucks. Which is so hard to get you to go back and forth on a character like that so many times.
I don't know if would be considered a bad guy. She's definitely selfish. Like she serves their best interests, whether that be
To the detriment of people who were not innocent, but like,
But
I think that makes you a bad guy.
yeah, I think she's a straight. I mean, she's not doing anything heroic. She has no sense of like.
I don't
good.
do anything heroic.
Well, and
Well,
I
you
think
may be a bad guy.
And I think one of the things they posed in the marketing for the movie was that Harley Quinn is playing hero with Birds of Prey, like this is her entry as a hero now. That everyone loved her so much, we're making her a hero, and they
or at
made
the
a
very least less.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I think they made a big point of saying she's like, fuck the Birds of Prey, I'm out of here.
Right.
That ain't me.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed what they kept to the character.
I also like that the Joker never makes an appearance.
Thank God.
In this whole movie, because
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, even in the animated entry where they reference the Joker, he's not drawn like the Joker that we saw in Suicide Squad. It seems like they knew the hip hop Joker was a bad idea.
right. Good call.
And so they're just trying to retcon that within the first 10
I had
minutes.
not heard him called that, but that is exactly what Jared Leto is.
He's a hip hop Joker, man.
Yeah, not so good. Yeah, so they and I think it's a little bit bogus to be like this whole movie is spurred on by like a scorned lover, just like who can't get over her boyfriend. But they do a lot to redeem that very quickly. One of the biggest things is just not putting the Joker in the movie, which is kind of amazing.
I think her. I think it's more the relationship that they hint that's the closest to that would be Black Canary and the Black Mask,
Yes.
because he's trying to be possessive of her and use her to further his own agenda. Do you guys want to talk about Black Mask though? Because I have some stuff. Or are we?
Yeah,
how are we-
let's get to performances and characters.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's great. Let's lead with the big bad Black Mask.
Yeah, I thought. So I thought Ewan McGregor did a really good job with him, like making him a little quirky and a little idiosyncratic, but which is more interesting to me than just some overt villain type. I don't think he was fully fleshed out enough.
And we kind of talked about this in the comic books. He's a B team at best in the Gotham Batman story. He has a lot more prominence in Teen Titans as a bad there. And so like they kind of picked a character, which Marvel will do a lot, where they could it was putty, so they could kind of form it out in the cinema a little bit of what he was. It's not even clear why. I guess he has an obsession with masks, like why he wears a mask.
The one time you even understand that is when you go into a room in his house and he's just showing her all these masks and that's it.
Yeah.
In a movie that is filled with villains who are kind of being superheroes, to have an even worse villain, I think they did a good job of making him very bad, though.
Oh, he was maniacal and like
Yeah.
sadistic, but
I think a key to a good action movie is when the bad is not necessarily like so tactilely or just like professionally good, but they're so chaotic that you just don't know what they're going to do. They could just be so violent on a whim for no reason. That to me is the scariest like action movie bad guy, and I think they nailed it with this.
I
I
think they
agree.
could have done a little bit more because I feel like there were maybe 2 scenes where he did something really unexpected. And it was kind of that 0 to 60, but the rest of the time he was like just this like quirky guy.
Well, you kind of see him grow as getting unhinged more the more his plans fall apart.
Yes.
That he's got this moment where he realizes, man, it's not really working out. And that's when he makes a woman across the bar who is laughing at something. And he's just like, is she laughing at me?
Yeah.
And he makes her dance on a table. And it is like
Unnerving.
triggering.
Yeah.
Like if you've had something
And I
like
think
happen to you, that's a very triggering
They're
scene.
going for that. Like
Yeah.
they're being on that edge. I don't think they wrote that character tone deaf. Like you're supposed to be like, fuck this guy.
Well,
This guy
and-
sucks.
But at the same time, you've been gradually brought up to this point thinking like this performance is a delight.
Oh, yeah.
Like how nutcasey he is and just his like reactions to things
Yeah.
are like,
Typically, really
so
bad guys
fun.
don't say ew that much.
yeah, right. He's just like, icky, get it out of here. Like his personality was very charming and interesting. And that's why I thought his performance was near like the top of the list of performances in this movie.
Margot Robbie's performance?
It was basically the same continuation from Suicide Squad that we saw. I mean, she did great in Suicide Squad. She did great here. I think she built off it a little bit because she's becoming more independent and maybe growing a little bit as that character. But, I mean, it was fine. Didn't really deviate from anything.
I think it has to be one of the hardest characters to pull off because it is so already baked. And even like the accent and stuff, like you don't really get to like invent an aspect of Harley Quinn that doesn't exist.
This is part of what I was wondering because I was expecting more depth of character, knowing who Margot Robbie is and like how great I, Tonya was and like a million other movies that she's done where she's had just incredible roles. We know that she's got the chops
Oh, yeah.
to add just tons of depth to this character. But at her core, is Harley Quinn a character with depth or is she completely insane? And I think the crux of the character is that she's fully off her rocker. And you can only add so much reality and depth to a character like that and stay true to the character themselves.
I think the biggest piece of that is that she'll show a little bit of vulnerability, but you can almost kind of see that insanity just has to come right back.
Sure.
With everything she's been through, that's her coping mechanism.
Right.
Is to be that insane and to not care as much about the girl, the Cassandra Cain and stuff. Like, she will start to break a little bit, but she can't really stay there for long, or she'll just stay there. She'll wither away.
I think whereas Ryan Reynolds made Deadpool palatable and even likable to me in the movies, Margot Robbie did the same thing for Harley Quinn. To me, where I find Harley Quinn a little bit on the edge of annoying, just as a character in the realm of comic books, Margot Robbie brought her into where I was like, maybe I like Harley Quinn. Any other performances that stood out?
I thought Huntress was so good.
Mary Elizabeth Winstead?
Yes.
Yeah.
Amazing performance at being like, obviously it's like super hyper character work
Yes.
to be this really introverted, unsure of themselves person, but also be a badass at the same time.
Totally
Like a homeschooled weirdo.
Unsocial, yeah. Unsocialized too. Like,
But like such a badass.
Yeah.
Like I loved her in the mirror being like, they call me Huntress. And she's so monotone.
Yeah.
And they carry that through the entire movie so well.
and her reactions to things just every time people
Yeah.
are like, they have to have a reaction to what she does, and
Right.
she's like, "Oh, is that not something I should have done?"
I think they're even like, Crossbow Killer would have been a better name for you.
It's Huntress.
Yeah.
She was great. Black Canary was definitely like the straight man of the whole thing, which is interesting because you got Rosie Perez's character who you would expect to really be the straight man throughout, but I think ultimately that lies in
And she was
Black
buddy
Canary.
cop.
Yeah, she was the chip on her shoulder character. She always had that something to prove.
Yeah.
And I think Black Canary was more of the begrudging tag along. I don't really want to be in this, but I think that's the reason that you had to have Cassandra Cain, the kid, at the center, because you have all these women who never in a million years would have worked together otherwise, but because they all have to protect this girl, they're going to be a team now.
Yeah.
And they're all people who it seems like had complicated histories leading up to the women they are now. So when they see a young woman at this crux of change, everyone wants to have their
Yeah.
chance to
You're going to be under my wing.
to
You're gonna be
right
under
that
my
wrong.
wing.
Right, exactly.
What was the biggest scene, the most iconic or memorable scene that you think happened in this entire movie that people will talk about?
To me, this is an easy one, and it's so Harley Quinn, and it's exactly what I wanted from the movie. I was like, oh, I'm getting it right now during this scene. When she busts into the police station and has this, like, grenade launcher and this belt of grenades that are all, like, goop and
Glitter.
Yeah.
and
Smoke bombs.
Yeah.
powder dust and different, like, gag arsenal. Like, that scene was so much fun. And that was the first, like, heavy action scene, too.
Mm-hmm.
So you're seeing her kick ass. It's really cartoony. It's zany. It's funny.
Yeah, she was whipping that thing around.
Oh, my God. That scene is great.
One of my favorite scenes was actually seeing Black Mask explode. It's toward
Off the bridge?
the very end of the film. I wasn't expecting it. You know what I mean? It's just like you forget that there's a grenade in 2 scenes previous, and then it's on his coat or whatever, and then all of a sudden he just explodes into this blood cloud, and I just thought it was fucking striking.
It was such an unclimactic, sudden death. I mean, obviously, exploding into a bunch of pieces is climactic.
Yeah.
But the quickness with which they did it,
Yeah.
was just like, oh God, it's done.
I thought it would have been like drawn out a little more. This fight between
they
Harley
won,
Quinn.
I guess. Yeah.
And continue story.
I mean, he just fucking erupted.
I think you nailed it, Mike, with what is the most iconic.
Yeah.
The first scene that showed me what this movie is going to be
Yeah.
is when Harley is trying to get her footing, and she's like, I'm going to get a hyena. And so she gets a hyena, and immediately it cuts to the way that she got it was she fed the person that was selling it to her to the hyena because they were like being creepy to her.
Yeah.
And like straight up the hyena's like eating a foot. And I was like, oh, this is a violent movie.
I mean, I have a couple, but I think they're just more aesthetic because it took me out enough to just kind of remark on how high action it was. One was probably the one in the funhouse with the hands, that platform where all of them are fighting together, and it was just choreographed, like really good. I guess that's not very,
Yeah.
you know. But the second one I think would be with Huntress on the motorcycle and Harley on the roller skates, trying to chase down Black Mask in the car. And it was kind of an elongated scene for a chase scene, but it was really just high action and a lot of stunt work that I was like, this is some serious stuff.
Yeah. Her getting into the car
Yeah.
and then back out of the car.
Yeah.
And then hitching on the motorcycle
Yeah.
again. Very kick-ass.
I just kept thinking like that. You've got to be going so fast.
Yeah.
Like I don't even know how.
The bearings on those skates
Yeah.
are not going to be able to hold up.
Yeah. One of the things I appreciated about, just to riff off of that, the fight scenes weren't so close up that you're just like, I'm just seeing fists fly and I can't make sense of how well choreographed this all is.
Yeah.
The violence scenes were like a beautiful dance. I
Yes.
mean, like you take a step back and you can really soak in all the movement and what's happening, which is a huge miss in a lot of action movies, and they got that right for sure. So I
And
think
even to be able to place where the one person who's hiding and not in the action
Yeah.
is at all times, and how they're all like, "Hey, you okay? Okay, cool. Now I'm gonna go fight some guys. Hey, you okay? It's my turn to check on you. You're moving over here.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. And you can just track everybody throughout the course of it. It was bonkers.
One other iconic scene that I wouldn't necessarily call like a scene was the night of her partying and like the debauchery that she kind of gets into seems very believable. Like I've been like, oh, I've seen my friends get that drug before and
Yeah,
make really
over a
bad-
breakup.
really bad decisions, or even myself. And so like that was good that they like made it real. Like because I think you could just over movie-ize that, and they didn't. Like it just felt like, oh yeah, that's how that night would go. I don't know that I would blow up an entire factory, but
No,
Hey, well, if you give him the opportunity, you might have.
or break a driver's legs. But,
Did you guys remember that scene where like Black Mask is cutting off that person's face You're just like, oh, that's kind of weird.
Isn't it his henchman doing it, or is
Oh
he
yeah,
doing
I guess it's Zazar or whatever that guy's name.
That guy was good. I really liked the dynamic that they had. If we're on performances again,
Yeah.
Like-
That guy was from the Mindy Project.
Yeah, he
I
was.
totally forgot that, and that's a different role than
Oh, yeah.
what we got in this movie.
but I think he did it really well. I mean, it was weird the symbiotic nature that they had too. Like he was like mad at Harley and at Black Canary for coming in because he looks after Black Mask and he's the protector of him. And like weird that he was almost like the guy behind the guy type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was good.
Along those lines, did you have a cringiest scene within this movie that you would have put out there? We talked about one, which is where she goes into like this singy kind of thing that's a daze. It's hard to even explain if you haven't seen the movie, but it's essentially her performing like a musical of sorts. Not what I want to see in an action movie.
I don't know if it's a cringy scene, but one I didn't really enjoy was the whole breakfast sandwich kind of scenario where she was like,
Not great writing. I'll say that.
Getting off on this sandwich because it was like the best made sandwich ever made, and like she just went off on this wax poetic for about 5 minutes on this breakfast sandwich, and I was just like, I could see this being in a comic book, but like I don't really think it
was
needed
shot
to be
well,
in the movie.
but I'm like, okay, I get what you're going for, but I don't. Yeah,
Look, if you're dealing with a breakup and that's the last money that you have in the world and that's all you can look forward to,
Yeah.
you might be a little overdramatic and you're insane. I mean,
okay, yeah.
makes sense.
It did a
made
good,
sense to me.
Yeah, it did a good job of kind of like showing the hangover, just like all that's important to
Yes.
me right now is like cheese and bread.
Tell me if you had just bought a Little Caesars hot and ready with the last of your money,
Mm-hmm.
dealing with a really bad breakup, and someone takes it out of your hands, throws it in the street. It's been raining. There's gravel in it.
Yeah.
Can't eat it anymore.
It shows how much this character just lives in the one moment and nothing else.
The present,
Yeah.
completely
Yes.
present. I've walked out of like a bodega before because they didn't have everything bagels, and I was just like, nope, we're not getting breakfast today.
I don't think my scene is, I don't know if it's cringeworthy for the meaning that you're going for, but definitely the table dancing scene.
Yeah.
Could
Oof.
not.
I think intentionally cringy. Though.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
that was
So
rough.
not unintentional, but
Yeah.
definitely like the hardest part of the movie for me to get through.
Yeah.
I think with as good as they did with Harley, she still had a handful of lines that I was kind of like, ugh, the joke didn't quite land. The most joke thing that did not land for me was the Easter egg. Was just like, what a weird note to go out on as like this kind of like gotcha. So super spoiler alert for people.
Yeah.
That there's a tiny little bit of an Easter egg, and so like that for me, like sometimes I would say 90% of her jokes landed, but some there'd be like this realm of like, not I'm not the audience. Well, then we've arrived. What is your overall rating? You want to do this 1 through 10?
Yeah. Let's do 1 through 10.
1 through 10 overall rating on Birds of Prey: The Fantabulous Emancipation of Harley Quinn. Did I get it?
I think so.
Okay. Fantabulous.
I gave it an 8 out of 10. It had its problems, it's had its flaws, but overall, I really enjoyed myself. I didn't want my money back at the end of the movie, and I think it really showed that DC has finally figured out their audience and their tone for the rest of the films.
I think it delivered on the title. Like Greg was saying, it's a really fun action movie, but it also took this kooky character and walked through her emancipation of Joker without the Joker. It honored like a female character being the lead and didn't make it about a man, while also being a story about leaving a relationship and go like essentially we're watching her like hit the 5 stages of grief. She's like dabda-ing over the like 2 hours of this movie we're watching, which is an interesting theme that I just thought was really creative and clever to add throughout the movie. So I'm gonna give it an 8.7.
Great.
B plus.
It's a good rating.
I was going to say 3.5 out of 5 stars.
Okay.
So that translates to like
70% maybe.
yeah, like maybe 75.
Yeah.
So 7.5.
I really liked it, but I can't give everything 100%.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
because I've liked other movies that felt more significant, if that makes sense.
I am at the same rating as Caitlin, a 7.5. I would call an 8 or above something that if somebody was like, you want to see that movie again this week? I would be like, yeah. And I didn't feel the urge to go see this movie again. So that's why I'm not going 8 or above. But it was certainly a great, enjoyable experience. I don't have too many criticisms of it. It delivered more than what I expected on it. And I would go see another Harley Quinn movie.
Yes. I think for me personally, the fight sequences gave it some good rewatchability.
Yeah, I would
which is
definitely see it again.
Which is probably why my rating was a little higher there.
You re-talking that out and talking about that scene with the bazooka or whatever it is, grenade launcher gun, made me be like, yeah, they did certainly nail some really exciting scenes here. Yeah. So definitely worth watching.
Even the scene where all the jail cells open and of course it's like water everywhere from the sprinklers. I was like, I don't really want to watch a whole scene of this. And then you watch the whole scene and it never gets boring.
Right. And they also didn't show her nipples.
Yeah. It never becomes a sexy thing. It never becomes like... just like it was just my words are failing me today, but you guys are being very kind. Like it was good. It was a good scene.
Wholesome scene.
Same thing. Like we've got that great police office break-in that leads to the jail break-in that leads to the evidence locker fight, which in an evidence locker is just full of weapons, right?
Yeah.
And those 3 segmented fight scenes together were just a beautiful thing. It went on for like 20 minutes, which is like a lot of choreography.
She takes that bat. Ooh.
Even the time that she like points to the guy on the wall. What's his name again from Suicide Squad?
Captain Boomerang.
Yes, and she's like, "Oh, hey, I know that guy." Yeah. It's like just like crazy, like
I think I compared this a little bit to when Ghostbusters kind of first came out, although I wasn't like old enough to know that era, but my understanding was people didn't really know what to do with it because it was like somewhere in the range of like horror movie, and as it's, gone along, it's like, oh, it's probably way more in the comedy than it is horror movie or even action movie. And I think like viewing this movie, we couldn't even land on the genre, and I think this movie's going to take a little bit of time for people to be like, what is it? So when we called it a cult classic up front, I think that in its truest sense, this movie's going to age a little bit better than most DC movies.
I just don't think you would have ever before right now have gotten in an almost entirely female cast
and female director
dealing with real but not overly dramatized issues that are specific to women that is driven by action instead of anything else. Like not emotional, not sex, just like action and plot movement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, Birds of Prey, you did it. You got a passing grade. You got a 75 and above. All right, we promised it. We will deliver it. And the end of this segment, which we normally do our news at the top, we're going to talk about just some non-superhero trades. If you're walking into a comic book store, you're a comic book person, you're like, I got to up my ante. I got to just grab some stuff to get back into it. What happened in the last year and a half that can get me rolling? What are those books that people can do that? And by the way, I'm going to shout out, this comes from our friend Adam Roberts, who owns Screenland, which we have talked in front of his movies a handful of times here in Kansas City. So friend of the pod, kind of a little bit forlorn that he didn't just fucking text us directly and say, what comic book should I see? But we saw that he had a Facebook post, so this is a shout out to Adam to help him, and maybe you're in his same situation of what comic books do I buy if I've been out of the game for a minute?
I would say, first off, you want to look at Gideon Falls, A Walk Through Hell, Fair Lady. Like, those are just great kind of creepy detective fantasy. Well, Fair Lady's more of a fantasy criminal detective book, but those are just really good segmented stories that I think a lot of people...
Great call on Fair Lady. I forgot about that. I think that's the Copperhead artist.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that, like, it's a buddy cop, but in a whole other way.
It's like in the Lord of the Rings realm. It's like cops in Lord of the Rings.
Do you think that's too superhero-y for somebody looking for something that's not so superhero-y?
I think not really, because it's still, even though it's like set in this fantasy realm, they're still solving crimes in that realm. It's basically, there's kidnappings, there's ransoms, there's just, death and murder, and you got to figure it out. And I think it's fun and it's an easy way to maybe transition into more hard fantasy stuff.
It's also, I think, doesn't it complete itself over and
Yeah.
over again?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like each issue you can kind of just go with it.
It's a one and done kind of
Yeah, it
thing.
reads like a Saturday morning cartoon in some ways.
Yeah.
We had mentioned before this pod as we were kind of pre-gaming this, Die, which is by the same author of Wicked and Divine, which wouldn't really count in the last year and a half, but would totally recommend that. But Die, in some ways, is an improvement of Wicked and Divine. As good as Wicked and Divine is, Die is a little bit more together. Wicked and Divine goes a lot of soap opera places, and it's like a lot of drama and a lot of like things. Whereas like Die is just, it's straightforward. Like, hey, these kids have this die that sends them into this terrifying D&D world where they become their actual D&D characters.
Yeah.
And everything bad that you can imagine about that scenario does happen, and they're still trying to figure out who the fuck they are in their midlife crisis.
That's true.
And it's a wonderful story, and the artwork is absolutely insane.
Good pick.
I would say, for the same reasons, artwork and the story being insane, the New World would be good.
Oh yeah, good call on New World. That one is absolutely insane. Trad Moore, who also did Silver Surfer Black, but we're doing non-superhero things here.
Crowded would be another good one, non-superhero.
Yeah,
Yeah, and what's great about that one is they have a movie coming out in the next year or so about Crowded.
yes, they do. Mike D and I did a Patreon about the last 4 issues of Something is Killing the Children, which I cannot recommend enough.
Yeah.
So amazing. If you're even in a little bit into horror movies, that is an amazing book to check out.
You guys liked Once and Future as well.
And I love it. Yeah, continued. And I think the first trade just came out or is about to come out. I'm doing in the monthly, so I don't actually know. But that's just a retelling, or I guess a modern look at what King Arthur's legacy would do. So like Relics, it's anthropological and stuff, but it's also action movie, and it has this cool juxtaposition, which is Mike D has a soft spot for, where old person fights with a new person, like
That's exactly right.
geriatric almost
We've
person.
got, someone in senior living. Bust loose. I love it. Give seniors their due. You think you're so original with your feelings?
If you were gonna jump in now on like what was 3 or 5 years ago the saga or the East of West, what non-superhero book would you say has that steam and hype to be like, okay, I was there?
Great question.
When it started.
Yeah.
I have a couple just to throw out there that I don't
Well,
see what you think. But go ahead.
I'll say Greg mentioned Gideon Falls earlier, and that's a book that I certainly feel is like born in this really real feeling environment that grounds you in a reality first before getting into the zaniness of the ethereal and otherworldly. And those are the sort of things that like really have legs that
and
I
it's
get excited
been
for.
optioned, and I think there's 2 trades of it out. So good
Yeah.
time to jump into it.
Totally.
If you were like gonna actually own the first 5 books of something, I guess, like, or what would that be? Because like Gideon's is a little bit like, I think number 1
Yeah.
would be even hard to get a hold of right now. So I don't know. I was gonna put out there, I think Undiscovered Country has a little bit of that kind of
And that
steam.
just started.
Yeah.
You can still get first prints of
Yeah.
that online.
So there's that. I think Family Tree, which is another Jeff Lemire book, has a little bit of steam behind it. I know that. Sorry, I'm giving you all of mine real quick. I think Excellence and Bitter Root were 2 books that started off good and kind of kept being good, and there's talks of options within there as well. So those might be some hype trains to jump on too.
Yeah.
Well, I think you already mentioned it, and it's going to be hard to get these books, but the Die books, I mean, that series is like just phenomenal. It's like redefining, aspects of storytelling in comic books and what people are really gravitating towards. And I mean, you may not be able to get the single issues, but get the trades. I mean, they're just so good. So good.
It's wonderful.
And also, it may be a superhero book, but read Immortal Hulk. It is like just scary and like
And you don't have to
spooky.
read. You don't have to read anything else. Like,
No, yeah, it's so self-contained and not
definitely standalone.
worrying about what else is going on in the Marvel universe. It's just a fun book. I know I broke the rules, but
No, I think that would be my closing sentiment as well, is that I read mostly superhero comic books, and I think there are some that transcend what a lot of people think superhero comic books are. My advice to people who are looking for stories in comic book form that they would enjoy if they like that medium but are just worried to get into it is that once you find an author you like, find other authors recommended based on those authors, and don't be afraid to be a fan of someone who's also written superhero stuff and then try out their superhero stuff that they've written. Because if Jeff Lemire writes a great, horror mystery that you love, then you're probably going to like his run of like Sentry or something, which like really explores self.
Isn't this interesting? I think that 10 years ago, we would have said non-superhero is the indie everyman like kind of way to enter comic books. Now it's so that like the actual like counterculture indie thing is to like get into a big 2 book.
Yeah.
If you can.
Yeah.
Because like Image is just like so huge and ubiquitous that it's like if you could actually figure out how to dip into a big 2 book, like good for you. And they're also fucking killer.
Yeah. Different. They've got the money to pay the best writers.
Yeah. Because I mean,
that's not to say that there aren't great writers who are just like getting into comic books or who haven't had their opportunity yet, but there are some great writers that Marvel and DC are drafting.
Okay.
And some like kind of obscure stylistic choices too. Like it's not even a bad idea just to go and browse and see what covers and see what aesthetic pops to you, because that's how I found Vision, and I never probably would have gone into the big 2 heavily had I not started with something that was.
I think that's a good recommendation. Just go into a comic book shop and see what just kind of
you can't judge by cover, but you can definitely find avenues that you are going to gravitate toward.
And I think that that's why you have to kind of cake that question in like, what is the relevance of it? If you're saying, I want to be part of the hype that is happening in comic books, that's one question. If you're saying, I want a great one and done vacation read, like I just want to like escape and read myself like silly, that's another question. So, and I think there's a million types of shoppers that come into like comic books. And I think you also could, if in comic books are expensive, like you come in and you spend $15 and you got a dud, like you might not come back for another year and a half. So it's worth talking and having this conversation to get
what's good for that? This podcast.
This podcast is fucking great for that.
Yeah. We talk about firsts all the time, indie and superhero. So if you want to know what to read, just listen to us. We'll always be there for you. We'll always be there for you.
I'll leave this out there.
That sounded threatening.
If you just read a title and you don't want to listen to it, just fucking message us and we'll tell you if the book is good or not.
Yeah. We'll cut the BS and tell you yes or no.
As long as you show a picture that you rated and reviewed us, we'll fucking talk to you all day. All right. And that's a pod.
Bye, everybody. Thanks again for joining us on First Issue Club. Don't forget, we are going to C2E2 when it comes around. We're going to be doing all kinds of posts and stuff on every social media, so look out for that. Don't forget to sign up for our Patreon, where we have bonus episodes, interviews, videos, all kinds of fun stuff. Rate and review on iTunes, and see you next time. A beep bop boobity boobie. This is Greg on Movie.
That's a thing we say.
New listeners.
That's a thing.